The fallacy of Mark Carney taking over Canadian politics. Hi, I'm Brian Lilley, political columnist for the Toronto Sun. Liberals chose a new leader on the weekend. They chose Mark Carney, the former governor of the Bank of Canada, governor of the Bank of England, man behind the push for net zero, no pipelines, no natural resource extraction. That Mark Carney. It's not really much of a change from Justin Trudeau and his cabinet, especially when you consider that most of Carney's backers were Trudeau cabinet ministers, and he's brought back two former Trudeau cabinet ministers as his top advisor. Marco Mendicino will be his chief of staff. David Lametti, Trudeau's former justice minister, will be a top advisor to Carney. Remember, these were the two guys joking in text messages about how many tanks to unleash on protesters in Ottawa just days after the Freedom Convoy arrived. These are the guys who brought in things like the gun ban that wouldn't pass Parliament because it was objected to by every group, including First Nations groups, that brought in legislation to reduce mandatory minimum sentences for gun smuggling and gun trafficking, and brought in bail as the de facto position for everyone. So that's who Carney's top advisors are. The same as the old guys, people with radical positions. But now Carney is trying to push the narrative, and the media in this country is trying to push the narrative that he's already closed the gap, that he is essentially leading Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives. Simply not true. Look, the latest poll for Post Media by Leger, the most accurate pollster in the last several elections, shows that the Conservatives are at 43% versus 30% for the Liberals. Now, when you put Mark Carney as the leader, it shrinks a bit. It becomes 41% for the Conservatives to 33% for the Liberals. That's still a significant lead. That's an 8-point gap. That is a majority government, no matter how you slice it. But Leger also asked Canadians questions. Who do you trust most on certain issues? And this is where it gets interesting. Let me pull up the poll and break it down for you. On the question of who would best handle the cost of living crisis and inflation, 33% said Pierre Poilievre, 27% Mark Carney. In touch with the realities of today's Canada, 33% Pierre Poilievre, 22% Mark Carney. Has what it takes to stand up to Donald Trump, 32% Pierre Poilievre, 28% Mark Carney, and understands concerns of people like me, 31% Pierre Poilievre, 18% Mark Carney. If you look at polling aggregators like 338canada.com, they've still got it as 39-33 for the Conservatives. And that is including polls by companies like Ecos, which are outliers and that I dismiss outright because of statements and claims made by Ecos President Frank Graves saying that he wants to make sure that Pierre Poilievre never becomes prime minister. That should discount him from everyone else's numbers and equations. Maybe that's why CBC's poll tracker still has a 10-point gap. You don't believe me? Look at CBC's poll tracker, 40% to 30%. Conservatives leading by 10. The idea that Mark Carney and the Liberals are suddenly the runaway favorites for the next election is nothing but a media narrative by a national press gallery that is obsessed with Mark Carney and who hates Pierre Poilievre as much as most Canadians hate Justin Trudeau. So Canadians are willing to move on. They're looking to move on. Sure, some were parking their vote with Pierre Poilievre. That's why the gap has closed somewhat. But it's not as if there is suddenly a rush of love for the Liberals again. Let me point out once again, all the same people that were around Trudeau are now behind Carney. All the same policies are there, other than they'll scrap the consumer carbon tax and increase the carbon tax, on things like steel mills, which will mean lost jobs, especially when coupled with Donald Trump's tariffs. This is a bad media narrative, one designed to bring about a certain result, to try and encourage more people to say they'll leave the Conservatives and back the Trudeau-Carney Liberals for a fourth term. Is that what most Canadians want? I don't think so. Let me know what you think. Drop a comment down below. Share this on social media. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel.